Hi, everybody. This is Meilin Obinata, your host for today's Talk of the Bay. We're going to be discussing the latest controversies about the Rail and Trail Project and the Regional Transportation Commission and all things related to passenger rail transportation. But first, we're going to hear from a local train activist, Jessica Evans. Jessica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm a local Santa Cruz resident, and I'm a volunteer activist for the Rail Trail and for bringing rail transportation to Santa Cruz County. And I'm really excited to be here. Thanks, Meilin.
Thanks for being here. I know that the Corridor ID program is important, but maybe you could explain to people, what is it?
The Corridor ID program was a Biden initiative to identify worthy passenger rail projects all over the USA and provide federal support to bring all of those projects up to a readiness level where they would be ready to apply for 80% matching construction grants from the federal government to build rail transit systems.
In other words, free money, right? Free money from the national government. Okay.
Yeah, it's federal. It's a federal program. And, the current administration is still funding this program, actually, at full levels. It's one of the few Biden-era infrastructure projects that has the full support of the current amazingly chaotic administration. But yes, federal ID is still going.
Okay, and why does that matter in Santa Cruz County?
Santa Cruz is our little branch line that goes from Pajaro Junction all the way to Davenport. The portion of it from Pajaro, which connects to the regional rail network, to Santa Cruz is part of the Corridor ID program as one of 3 lines in the Central Coast Corridor, which was sponsored by Caltrans. Caltrans is our sponsor, our local sponsor, and Caltrans Office of Rail Planning and Implementation thinks that our line is really important, wants our line to be part of the regional rail network, and sponsored us for inclusion in Corridor ID, and we were accepted.
So being accepted to Corridor ID, it sounds like a pathway to free money. So is that something... I mean, I don't know that people, if they're hanging out at home, I don't think anyone's saying Corridor ID. So is that something the regional transportation is processing, or what? How do you see the situation with our qualification for this amazing program that would give us access to all kinds of free money?
So I don't quite understand. There seems to be a whole lot of silence on the part of the local regional transportation commission, and maybe it's just that staff is not rail staff. They are highway staff, so rail is not their focus. But when I first kind of started learning about Corridor ID, I actually did go around and do presentations to commissioners, and they were all really surprised. They were like, what is this, and why don't I already know about it? And I was like, I do not know why you don't know about it, but here's what it is. It's awesome. We're already in it. As a matter of fact, step 1, the scope of work, has already been completed. Zoe Lofgren and Jimmy Panetta got money for us to participate in that part for our little local match. They got money for Caltrans to be able to do our local match. So anyways, we're rolling. We're about to start step 2, which is where they do a bunch of value engineering and try to figure out ways to save money on our passenger rail system. And they figure out whether there's ways to do phased implementation. And, that's going to start happening at the beginning of, in the first quarter of 2026. So any minute now, that is going to start happening. So I don't know why the RTC isn't paying any attention to this. I really don't. And unfortunately, if we take out the tracks or do anything to damage the tracks, we will probably lose our Corridor ID eligibility, because the Federal Railroad Administration is not really interested in continuing to pay for this for us if we are not doing our part and moving forward with passenger rail.
Okay, so it kind of sounds like you have to do stuff to keep the connection to the free money.
If you are trying to tell the federal government, hey, please help us develop passenger rail. Please let us participate in this amazing program. Please give us money. And then we turn around and we break our rails. Why would they take us seriously as partners? Why would they take us seriously as wanting to move forward with this project?
Hey, that's a fair question. Anything else we should think about in terms of corridor ID, or what do you think people should do to make sure commissioners and the staff know what they should be doing about this?
Well, right now, the commission is considering trying to save money on the Mid-County Trail project by removing the rails and just building the trail without the rails, which is crazy pants, because this is exactly what the community already voted 73% against doing. And if they do that, it will get us kicked out of the Corridor ID program and basically stop us from ever being able to have regional rail, being able to have passenger rail in Santa Cruz. So it's terrible, and it's completely unnecessary, because there's streetcar rail systems all over the USA that have trails right next to rails. We don't have to have this huge setback that they built everywhere else. There's no reason to have to take the rails out just to be able to have affordable trail that is close to the center of the corridor. So, the listener should know that it's very viable and very affordable to build a trail project in Mid-County that does not need to take the railroad tracks out. And please tell the commission if you want to participate, if you want to, see passenger rail happen, let the Regional Transportation Commission know. Reach out to your county supervisors, reach out to, your commission members, and tell them, we don't have to take out the tracks to build the trail, just build the trail closer to the tracks. And please don't get us kicked out of Corridor ID.
Thank you so much. That was Jessica Evans talking about Corridor ID. Hi, everybody. This is Meilin Obinata, your host for today's Talk of the Bay. I'm joined here by some, I'm thinking, amazing guests. So we have some in the studio, and we have also someone remote. So I'd like to start off by letting the guests introduce themselves. First, Stephanie Auld. Stephanie, how are you doing today? And thank you for being here.
Good. Thank you for having me. My name is Stephanie Auld, and I'm a commissioner on the IHSS and Public Authority Advisory Commission.
Thank you. And that is the in-home
supportive
services. Thank you. James Weller.
Hello, I'm Jim Weller. I am a longtime advocate of the Rail and Trail project, and I've been involved in it for some 20 years since I had an instrumental role to play in the original acquisition of the project or the railroad from Union Pacific Railroad Company.
Thank you. And Lani Faulkner.
Hi, Lani Faulkner. I am passionate about robust public transportation, which serves so many people who are often left out in our car-centric society. I also have a background in environmental education and founded Equity Transit, work with the Sierra Club and the Executive Committee, and a number of other local capacities.
Thank you. We also have on the internet Barry Scott. Barry, do you read us?
Barry's muted.
Barry, you might need to unmute yourself. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Would you like to introduce yourself, Barry?
Thanks very much. My name is Barry Scott, and my career is focused on sustainable energy, sustainable planning, and my background is completely about good planning and good technologies. And I've been a supporter of rail projects for more than 20 years, including 10 here on our branch rail line.
Thank you, Barry. So I was playing a clip at the top of the hour of Jessica Evans talking about the Corridor ID program. Would any of you like to respond to that and share your thoughts about the importance of that federal program? Anybody? Oh, Stephanie. I'll take Stephanie, and then I'll take Barry. Go for it, Stephanie.
I loved finding out about us having the opportunity to get that money, because all I keep hearing about are costs. I even hear from people who would benefit from the rail, oh, it's too expensive. I think there's a real misunderstanding in terms of understanding really what cost means. It's all relative. So this afternoon I was thinking, we pay for space exploration, but we have kids on Earth who are starving. So when you start talking about what's worth a cost and what's not, you really have to look at relative to what, and compare what are you going to get based on the cost or what you're going to pay for something. And I think that it's critical for us to analyze that when we decide, we make choices about what something costs.
Well, I might add that the Corridor ID program, as Stephanie alluded to, provides a significant amount of funds to help us further our rail program. And the thing to me that is quite shocking is that our executive staff at the RTC has not really explored both the Corridor ID program and a number of other financing options. For example, Portland, Oregon has used a number of financing options which do not include sales tax. I know there's a lot of talk about sales tax and concern about sales tax. When you talk about a service that serves all of our community, and especially 20 to 30% of our community that currently doesn't have access to robust transportation, we're talking about an investment not only in the now, but in the future. So I think the Corridor ID program has not been discussed by our executive RTC staff, and it's really disappointing.
Thank you, Lani. So I tried to do a show at the end of November last year, and I had great ambitions to cover all kinds of topics. And there's some stuff that I just didn't, I feel like I just didn't get to. And one matter is that the role of media literacy, or just understanding how people deal with misinformation and disinformation and propaganda, and that kind of those categories of information or media literacy, that I took those concepts actually off of the Union of Concerned Scientists website, because they've been battling climate change denial for many years, and they identify as a major source of of that problem, that the information war. And of course that made me think of our dear passenger rail plans. So I thought I would just read some quotes, because I know everybody wants to hear quotes from scientists. I know that. But let's see. So some people, interest groups, and organizations benefit from people not knowing the truth, and they create or spread untruths, or simply don't bother to set the record straight for their own personal, financial, or political gain. Propaganda can be defined as the deliberate dissemination of information, facts, arguments, rumors, half-truths, or lies to influence public opinion, with a relatively heavy emphasis on manipulation. So those quotes, again, those are from scientists, not me. They're talking about what are the goals of propaganda. So I thought I would just share that. And I think it's very hard for just like the average person in this county just to get good information about the rail and trail project. And I do understand there's a layer of like technicality and there's legal stuff and so on, but I don't know if any of you want to comment on the transparency that you want to see. But that's just me. I wish I just had better information.
I found myself frustrated because locally,
Mm-hmm.
I find that a lot of local media sources really are prioritizing certain people and viewpoints. And then some people who, let's say, who are proponents of rail, they might cut off their entire statements or not provide them in full, so that people aren't really getting a full picture of what's going on. Also, local media resources are either funded by or edited by opponents of the rail program. And so we're really seeing a skewed view of things when a lot of that money goes into local media. And for example, just next door, I've had my account turned off. I've known other people who've written just basic comments, students from college who've said, hey, I really want rail. It's personally important to me, and they've had their accounts cut off. There's a level of power in this community that's controlling the narrative, and that's very concerning to me.
Thank you, Lani. Why don't we check in with Barry? He might have addressed the technical issues.
I hope I have. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Meilin?
Yeah, thank you, Barry. Did you want to
yeah.
comment on corridor ID or the role of misinformation?
Real quickly, again, the Corridor ID program is one of many, and it's significant that we're selected. And as Jessica pointed out, our identification in that program comes with a lot of funding for the next couple of steps that are necessary to keep moving ahead with our rail planning project. On the matter of misinformation, goodness, Lani is correct that next door seems to be run have an inordinate amount of greenway and or rail opponents and on all kinds of different matters. It's not terribly representative, especially of the working class or the less privileged among us. And this is the thing about transit and the rail project, is that none of the people who are opposed to it seem to be people who are of a working class, people who are having trouble pay their bills. It's very easy if you can afford a car and car payments to think that we should just stick with our cars, or just go ahead and make buses better, and that'll be all we need to do. And it's just unfortunate, but the science is there anywhere, and our own county studies have shown over and over and over again that rail transit and a trail, as well, but mostly the transit part of the use of our rail corridor has the greatest return on investment. So Corridor ID program is evidence of that. We cannot build a trail over the tracks and retain our status in that and other programs.
Thank you, Barry. Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of give this question to everyone, but I'll start with James. What concerns you most at this time when you think about our passenger rail future?
Well, at this very moment, we are anticipating the February 5 meeting of the Regional Transportation Commission, at which it appears the county public works staff will propose to the commission a design for the so-called interim trail that will involve removing the existing railroad tracks entirely in order to build the so-called interim trail in the place where the tracks were. Now, that's a very serious problem because, as Jessica indicated, it's not necessary. There are well-established and well-engineered alternative designs. In particular, the so-called streetcar style design that has been handed to the county public works agency that would involve a number of measures short of actually tearing out the railroad tracks entirely. So there are a number of very good reasons why it's a real mistake to remove those railroad tracks, and I could go into those, but the main message that I have right now is that we need to focus on preventing the Transportation Commission from deciding to go ahead with the interim trail design that will involve tearing out the tracks. It's contrary to common sense. It's impractical, and it will not be in accord with the Commission's own directive on December 4th, which directed the staff to develop a proposal that would not involve removing the tracks. They have that proposal in front of them. It's been engineered, delivered to them, and apparently they refuse to take it seriously. So number one message for the Commission is 5 words. Do not remove the tracks. That's it.
Thank you, James Weller. I'm Meilin Obinata. We're talking about the Rail and Trail project, and we just heard from James Weller discussing the importance of the February 5th meeting and of communicating to commissioners that they should not remove the tracks. So I'm thinking of this as like a, what is it called? Like a 5-alarm fire. But I don't really see that the media kind of matching the energy. Of course, this is community. This is a community radio station, so I know that here at Casewood we match the energy. But yeah, it sounds like that meeting is of great concern. I wanted to make sure other people, like, if you want to discuss how you feel about our passenger rail future. Okay, Stephanie, would you like to say something?
So when I started looking into the issue, especially as a commissioner for IHSS, initially it was we have a shortage of caregivers for our seniors and disabled folk. We have a big gap. And what that means for people who are disabled and seniors who can't get care is, they're at home and they don't know when they're going to eat next. Or they don't know when their, pull-ups will be changed next or they'll be cleaned next. So that was what really got me into the issue, was how do we provide more caregivers to our seniors and disabled people? One of the big problems is people, low-income domestic care workers, can't afford to live in Santa Cruz. Most of them tend to live on the other side of the, not the other side of the hill, but the other side of the county in Watsonville. But we don't have, reliable transportation to bring them in an efficient way to Santa Cruz so that they can provide the support that we need. So what does that mean? For me, looking at the issue, I didn't see anybody talking about what are the goals. What are our goals to have more efficient transportation? When you're looking at infrastructure builds, what are the goals for those builds? Historically, FDR actually got us out of the Depression by providing jobs. In fact, if we do the rail build here, we're talking about 1,000 jobs being provided in Santa Cruz County just by building the rail, then in supporting the rail as well. I don't hear anybody talking about job provision in Santa Cruz as a benefit to the rail. Then I thought about, okay, well, what if we do nothing, right? Because what if we just sit on our laurels and we do nothing? I haven't seen anybody do a cost-benefit analysis. All I've been hearing out in the media is, it's going to cost $4 billion. But they're not talking about what the benefits are, that we reap by spending the money. Then going back to the corridor issue, I went to go talk to Supervisor Koenig at his January office hours on the 7th. And we talked about, I went to ask him, what alternative transportation options do we have? And at the time, he told me, glideways, Swift cities. The main thing he said was having buses on the shoulders of the freeway. So I said, okay, our options then are those. So glideways is a pod-based system. And let's look at the pluses and minuses associated with that. What if we just do trail And my understanding is a lot of people think that if we just do trail, that is the ecological, or that's the most environmentally sound option. But that's not true. If we just do trail, the Greenway proposed trail only is actually cuts down almost 1,000 trees. If you do trail and rail, it's 1,000 trees. If you just do the trail alone, you're still cutting down a significant number of trees. In fact, what Greenway is proposing is that we actually widen the trail from 12 feet to 16 feet, and that causes us to go further into green areas. So then we're cutting down more trees, and we're impacting more of our the environment around the trail. So please don't mistake the name Greenway as environmentally favorable. It is not. In fact, when we just do when we look at rail and trail together, we cut down 154 less trees with rail and trail together than doing trail alone. And there are other options. And so when I was looking at the cost-benefit analysis of all the different options, the number one net benefit came from doing rail. So having, what 73% of our community voted for, having rail with the trail. And, we can talk later on about what those benefits are, but the net benefit came from between 1.8 to 2.5 in favor of doing rail and trail, which means that we're saving $2.5 per car taken off of the road. And with rail, we're talking about in terms of environmental savings, in terms of the reduction of greenhouse gas effect and the carbon. We're talking about the equivalent of taking about 1,000 cars per year off of our highways, which we know we can't do nothing because Highway 18 and Highway 1 are both impacted. We have significant, we would have significant savings in terms of accident reduction and safety improvement if we do go to rail.
Thank you, Stephanie. I just want to return your attention to the topic of today's Talk of the Bay show, the rail and trail. We heard from Stephanie Auld, who was mentioning the importance of understanding what happens when you don't move forward with passenger rail, what we would be missing, as well as all the ecological benefits of doing so. And I tell people all the time, it's not just what you do, it's also what you decide not to do. Either way, there are consequences. And in the previous show that I did in November, my various guests, James Weller, Barry Scott, and Deborah Fudge, were discussing how to calculate the costs of actually moving forward with passenger rail. Is that something maybe, I think James or Barry, if you want to chime in on that, because I know that's something we covered in November, understanding the ways in which those estimates were formed. I know we talked about it, but I know that people had perhaps other things to do in the week right before Thanksgiving. Could somebody refresh our listeners' memory?
I'll speak, and I hope to hear from Jim as well. The two things I'd like to point out. One is that I was lucky enough to meet with staff, RTC staff, and some of the planners separately to go over what are the assumptions you're making. And the consultant, HDR, who came up with this $4.3 billion plan, made several missteps, including the amount of contingency, like, say something's going to cost $12, but we better call it like $30. We're going to have to double that 12 and then add another 50%. So the 4.3 is ridiculous. And another ridiculous level to this is that they assumed, without surveying all the bridges, that we'll just replace them all. And then a third thing was that we will build an elevated rail line above the boardwalk. And so this approach, one thing that the consultant was not asked to do was to design an affordable system. And one it'd be within reason to suspect that maybe somebody asked them to come up with the most expensive project they possibly could. Jim mentioned the streetcar project, and we brought the Coast Futura demonstration train here 5 years ago. And I hope listeners will visit the website coastfutura.org to see what that looks like. A doable small scale would go all the way to Watsonville streetcar system. Now, the other thing I want to say is that on the misinformation matter, one of the pieces of misinformation we get all the time is that, oh, don't worry, we'll build the trail and you can bring the rail back. And whether that's through rail banking or some other thing. And I don't think it takes much more than a 6th or 7th grade education to realize that if you take out the tracks and the signal and all the permissions that exist today for that railroad to exist, only to have to bring it back sometime in the future, then what we're telling our grandchildren and their children is that if you want to bring rail back, you can count on it costing 5 or 10 times as much as it would to do it right now. So at the very minimum, we're saying do not take the tracks out, do not decommission that railroad. And by the way, you guys, the county had committed several times to restoring the rail line to a minimum useful level, and they have failed to do that. Jim, what do you think?
Well, I think a lot. The issue of the hugely exaggerated cost projection that was embedded in the HDR consulting firm's Ziepert concept report has been becoming much more clear in the last month or two. I'll say that my friend Jim McKenzie and I have been working quite closely with the present officials at SMART, the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit Project, to do a very close line-by-line comparison between their actual costs for construction of Phase 1 of their 43-mile railroad project with the projected costs that HDR set forth. And it's become clear that what HDR is projecting is a full 10 times greater than the comparable actual costs for constructing SMART. It's an order of magnitude greater, and there's no basis for it. So, as Barry indicated, I can't dismiss the nagging suspicion that there was an invisible hand at work in the creating of that projection. I'm not going to call it an estimate because it's not an estimate. It has no actual basis in fact. What I have said recently is that if I were hiring a consulting firm to develop a concept for a large rail transportation project, and I directed them to come up with the most expensive imaginable concept, and then to project the very highest imaginable possible costs, I would have gotten exactly what HDR produced. So I'll leave it at that. That $4.3 billion to $6.4 billion cost estimate is just plain bogus. And the necessary comparisons have been made. There's simply no doubt about it. It can't be relied on. It's not a credible estimate.
Thank you, Jim Weller. So I wanted to read from the Wikipedia definition for a FUD, which stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So that's a manipulative, and I'm reading from the Wikipedia definition. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD, is a manipulative propaganda tactic used in technology sales, marketing, public relations, politics, polling, and cults. FUD is generally a strategy to influence perception by disseminating negative and dubious or false information, and is a manifestation of the appeal to fear. In public policy, a similar concept has been referred to as manufactured uncertainty, which involves casting doubt on academic findings, exaggerating their claimed imperfections. A manufactured controversy is a contrived disagreement typically motivated by profit or ideology designed to create public confusion concerning an issue about which there is no substantial academic dispute. So that sort of, that's... People, okay, guests are looking at me in the studio. Does anybody want to jump in? Because I think I do feel as a voter in this county that there's so much confusion, which seems unnecessary, and I feel like the science is very settled on the superiority of passenger rail technology.
100%. The most energy efficient way to transport groups of people places ever. Still, ever. Passenger rail is the most energy efficient. You want to save money, reduce greenhouse gases, get rubber tires off the road, which are actually far more toxic than people understand. My background's in biochemical endocrinology. We just need to put as much rail in as possible. And that has been a number one priority of the state of California. The state of California has the state rail network and the state rail plan. And one of their plans is to connect communities by rail. It is a priority. It has been a priority for years now. And that is one of the quintessential aspects of our rail line, isn't that we can just connect West Side Santa Cruz to Watsonville, which is critical because we have tons of people in Watsonville who really want to be able to come by rail. It's faster, it's easier, it's more dependable. Time and time again, our wheelchair users, people who are non-sighted, youth. If you go to the Smart Rail area, you talk to people and they're like, oh my gosh, I can now actually get around town because I can get on rail. Elderly, people who can no longer drive, people who don't want to drive. All of these people now have access to opportunity, whereas they didn't before. And so without rail, we leave so many people behind. And I was going to piggyback on what James just said, is that SMART, that has a very similar rail structure as we do, it's a one-track rail system. They built 40 miles of rail, and it was abandoned for about 60 years, so it was old like ours. They had to redo pretty much everything. They had to do the sideways that allow passing, and that cost them $500 million, so $500 million in 2018. You can go to the RTC meeting 2018 August 2 and listen to a really great program about that. So for $500 million in today's dollars would be about $1 billion plus or minus change. So realistically, $4.3 billion is just insanity. And the way that the executive staff at the RTC posted it was their executive, where they just do the summary first instead of the whole program and really explain where these numbers come from. And I think, as James and Jim McKenzie have alluded to, is that when you really delve into the numbers, it doesn't make sense. The numbers don't add up.
Thank you, Lani. And by SMART, you mean the Sonoma Marin, I think, area transportation. And okay, so you guys, this is audio, and I wish there were visuals, but Lani is wearing a T-shirt from Windsor Station with the beautiful SMART, the Sonoma Marin area transportation.
It's so exciting because SMART just opened up their newest station, which expanded their coverage, and they're going to expand even further to Healdsburg and then on to Cloverdale. And basically, they are far surpassing any kind of projections. They were thinking 5,000 passengers a day. They're past 8,000 passengers a day. That's 8,000 cars that we get off the roads. That doesn't even include weekend warriors and people visiting the boardwalk and all of that sort of thing.
Thank you. Barry, do you want to chime in on, or you want to react to what I was saying about FUD, fear, uncertainty, And go ahead.
Yes, no, absolutely. The fear, uncertainty, and doubt, I'm very familiar with the term, and I hope others become familiar with it. It's prevalent here, but it's also prevalent with other arguments that we see from opponents to any number of government plans. There are people who are opposed to parks and schools and anything that raises taxes without necessarily looking at the benefits of a publicly funded project. And so I think, we live in a time where social media is simply not our friend. It's a quick way to get connected, a terrible way to get news. And I just caution everyone to be sure to do their homework and look for more than one source of information, and just be sharp, be smart, and try to get two sides of any story.
Thank you, Barry. I wanna circle back to Stephanie. Now, I think that when just people think of transportation, they might not think, oh, transportation is access to healthcare, and you were mentioning that there are people who are not served. They don't have access to caregivers. And I'd love to hear about, I guess, some details about what percentage of the county population are disabled or seniors, and what are their key needs?
20% of our population in Santa Cruz County are disabled. And what that means, when Lani was talking about having the connection of transportation throughout the state, it means that we have transportation to the other side of the hill. Most specialty care for Santa Cruz County is done on the other side of the hill. So it's critical for us to have transportation that will get us to specialty care on the other side of the hill. We don't currently have a reliable, high-capacity form of transportation over the hill at all. Additionally, when Lani was talking about the connectivity of the transportation that ZPIRD would provide, I was thinking for Watsonville, having an ability to reliably get to just North County increases the access to jobs within 45 minutes by either doubling or tripling. So when we're talking about the social impacts of, say, rail and reliable high capacity transportation, it has a big impact in terms of social equity.
Thank you. Yeah.
What Stephanie was just saying, I think this is really critical because Stephanie hit on a number of things I want to emphasize. When Measure D ran, which was the test of do we rip out the tracks or not, and 73% of the population said no, we want to keep them intact. What we heard from were people who lived out of areas like Gilroy and Benicia, all beyond. Nurses who worked at Dominican and said, we are so frustrated that this question has even come up because we serve the Santa Cruz public. We can't afford to live in the Santa Cruz public area, but we have the need to have access, robust transit access, and they don't have it without rail. And now with this state rail network, they would be able to get on the train in Gilroy or other points outside of the county and come and serve here, which they really want to do. And the other thing I want to hit on what Stephanie said is, if you look at the American Public Transportation Association, they have clearly shown the statistic for every dollar we invest in robust public transit, $4 to $5 comes back into our community. So we are undercutting ourselves by not investing in rail transportation.
Thank you, Lani. Oh, Stephanie, were you going to?
Additionally, I just wanted to add that when we talk about reliable transportation, the bus system, our current low-income in particular, transportation system in the county, is late 40% of the time. So it's not a dependable way for low-income people and seniors and people with disabilities to say, hey, I'm going to get to an appointment, or hey, I'm going to get to a job. For people in wheelchairs in particular, if you are in a wheelchair at a bus stop, we have the best bus drivers in our county. They are sweet. People in wheelchairs always talk about how, compared to other cities, our bus drivers are fantastic. But, so they'll stop. If there are only 2 spaces on our buses for wheelchairs to carry wheelchairs, if both those spaces are taken, they have to pass you at the bus stop. Now, they always stop and say, I'm so sorry, but I can't take you right now. But then you're waiting at least 30 minutes for another bus to come. That means that you cannot depend on the bus transit system to get to appointments on time, to get to jobs, etc., or, healthcare even.
Thank you, Stephanie. Now, we're coming in fast we're hurtling towards the end of the hour. So I feel like I have to really choose my questions carefully. But I did want to mention, or wanted to ask about certain events and actions I've seen recently from the Regional Transportation Commission that just made me very confused. So, for example, I saw that there was some back and forth between the RTC and Progressive Rail about the administration coordination and license agreement. Does anybody want to jump in on that? Because I found that to be confusing, saying we're terminating this contract, and also to see the response from Progressive Rail. So maybe someone can explain it in very plain language.
Well, I don't think it can be explained in very plain language.
Okay.
It's very complicated situation. It's a sorry situation. It need not have come to the place where it is right now. But instead of answering that question, I want to remind people where we are. On December 4th, the RTC made a compromise decision that was intended to enable the construction of the Coastal Rail Trail in segments 9, 10, and 11 that is funded by the California Transportation Commission in a way that can be accomplished within the limits of the funding. But there were a number of parts to that decision. So the decision was partly to, yes, go ahead and build the so-called interim trail, which will not be the ultimate alignment, and which will be at least partially in place of the existing railroad tracks. But there was also a commitment to continue to pursue development of the passenger rail project and to carry out the design and build of the interim trail, so-called, in a way that would not involve the removal of the railroad tracks. The staff was directed to come back, this was December 5th, to come back in February, which is coming right up, with a design, a plan, to accomplish the construction of this interim trail in those segments in a way that's within the funding available and in a way that will not involve the removal of the railroad tracks. FORT, the Friends of the Rail and Trail organization, put a lot of time and effort in engineering, professional engineering work, into developing a proposal that would accomplish just that, and has presented it to the County Public Works Department, which is responsible for building the trail, and have run into a roadblock. For some reason, the Public Works Department doesn't want to do that. They want to tear up the tracks. It's critically important at this stage, before we worry about anything else, the design of the system, pros and cons of the system, the values of the system, the costs of the ultimate system. It's critical at this stage that we make sure that the RTC decides not to remove the existing railroad tracks. Because if they do, a whole chain of adverse consequences are going to unfold, which will end up destroying any near future hopes of passenger rail, and will also delay the construction of the trail as well.
And potentially we might lose the funding. I mean, I hear certain RTC staff say, oh, well, they'll extend our time, but there's no guarantee of that. And I think we're heading down a road that might potentially risk the funding on both the corridor ID and our large-scale trail funding. I just have to say that the biggest frustration, I really feel like it's a huge betrayal by our regional transportation executive staff. Obviously, they didn't really understand the depth of Measure D in 2022. It's a betrayal by certain elected officials who've decided to take a certain stance. It's not representative of our public. It's not representative of our majority and decades of work that we have done to do this project of rail.
So we only have, I think, like 3 minutes. So
absolutely.
I just want to ask. Okay, sorry.
I just wanted to say
go ahead.
we should consider partnering with Monterey in a partnership to do what SMART did, which is to increase our power to bring rail to the state rail network.
That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If we can get past this narrow passage, we can get to that.
I want all the guests to talk about, like, if you can assign homework to listeners, what actions do you want listeners to take after this show in preparation for the Thursday, February 5th meeting of the RTC?
Send email messages to every single RTC commissioner and every single city council member in Watsonville, Capitola, and Santa Cruz and Scotts Valley. Tell them one message, 5 words: do not remove the rails. Everything else can follow, but we have to make sure that that message is delivered.
Thank you, James. Anyone else?
I like that.
Yeah, I want to promote a couple of two websites.
Sure,
one is Friends of the Rail and Trail, FORT.org. And of course, what Jim suggested as well. And the second one is to take a look at what a streetcar system like the one that we actually brought here 5 years ago to operate for 7 days on our rail line. Go to coastfutura.org. That's it.
Thank you, Barry.
I'd just say,
Lani, yes.
as James said, please send in emails. Come to the meeting and speak. Usually you only get 1 minute. But send tons of emails and get your friends to send emails.
Thank you, Lani. Stephanie?
You can call in. If you look at the RTC's agenda, they will have a code so that you can participate virtually.
Thank you, Stephanie. So it's been my great pleasure to have Barry Scott, Lani Faulkner, James Weller, and Stephanie Auld all speaking on the Rail and Trail and how we need to act now so as to not remove the tracks. And this is the time you get to exercise your democratic muscles and reach out to your elected officials and commissioners. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Talk of the Bay. I've been your host, Meilin Obinata.